conference today. And with just some slight changes, but whichever version you have is great. I see we have a few other people joining us, so welcome in. Welcome. Thrilled that you're with us. We'll be throwing the link to the slide decks into the chat a few times because sometimes Zoom lets folks in the chat see what was in the chat previously. Sometimes when you join, you don't get to see anything that was in there previously. So we'll just kind of keep repeating ourselves in the chat with the link, but we're thrilled that you're here. And it's 10:30.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Ohio Family Engagement Summit. And we are really glad that you could join us on this day of professional learning meant to take family, school, community partnership to the next level. My name is Hangin Lee, and I will be this session's moderator. This session is session 1, Families and Schools Together, Building Hope and Belonging by Design. If you have any questions, concerns, or technical issues, please message me directly, privately in the chat. And if you would like contact hours for the session, a code will be provided at the end to enter a request form. So please be on the lookout for this code as it will only be provided once at the end of the presentation. To ensure that all get the most out of today, we ask that all participants turn off their webcams and microphones. If you have questions for the presenter, please use the chat feature and I will pass them along at an appropriate time. You can also join the conversation on Twitter and be sure to use the hashtag OHSummit24 to share your thoughts. And I am really excited to moderate the session and learn from Dr. Fred Zeromsky. So the floor is now yours, Dr. Z.
Thanks, Song-Eun, and welcome in, everybody. It's really exciting to see everybody here. It's a wonderful group. Appreciate you all being here. We have put into the chat the link to the slides. We'll keep putting it in again as Zoom sometimes lets us see what's in the chat before we arrive. Sometimes it doesn't, but I'm so thrilled that you're here. And we are going to be talking about building hope and belonging. It's going to be a hopefully interactive hour together, and this is two topics that are near and dear to my heart, so I'm thrilled. And Song-Eun, I'm not sure if you're noticing, we got 4 people in the waiting room. We'll keep adding folks in as they join. So a little bit about me. My background is within schools for my entire career. I kind of started in schools when I was in 4th grade, and my mom was a 1st grade teacher, and my aunt was a elementary school PE teacher. My uncle was a middle school principal, is in the Michigan Hall of Fame for middle school principals, and grandma was a teacher. My great grandma was a teacher, and got all their normal school certificates. So I tried not being a teacher, and it just didn't work. So I've always kind of been in the classrooms or as a school counselor, working in schools for the last, well, basically since 4th grade in some capacity. So with that, I am very interested in figuring out how kids can be successful in schools, how families and schools can collaborate to support the success of kids, to really create the pathways and the futures that we want for our kids, every single student, so that no student is kind of pushed out of the school system, but that everybody has opportunities for the future. So anyway, that's a little bit about my background. I was a school counselor in elementary and middle schools and in urban environments and rural environments. So feel free to check in with me later. You'll have my email at the end, and I'm happy to connect with you about any questions that you have after the presentation. So hope and belonging are two things that are very, very near and dear to my heart, in the sense that if I was building a school, I would really measure hope and belonging and be done with it. Because if we worry about standardized testing, for example, hope and belonging don't increase when standardized testing increase, but hope and belonging do impact academics. Hope's a better predictor of post-secondary success than ACT scores or SAT scores or GPA. Belonging is like a superpower. If you have belonging, you're going to be successful, and if you don't, you're not. And so I don't really need to know about much more besides hope and belonging. And then the ripple effects of strong hope and strong belonging will impact all those things that school leaders and administrators and politicians all care about as far as numbers. So that's where hope and belonging for me are such vital parts of what we're doing as family members and as caretakers and as community members and as educators. So that's where we're living today. So we're going to start with an interactive activity at the beginning and build off of that and then close kind of the loop around these activities at the end. So if you don't mind putting in the chat, we have a good number of people in our session here now. So there should be a large contribution in the chat, hopefully, if you don't mind. But the question is, if the definition of belonging that we're going to use today is feeling accepted, respected, included, and supported by others, where do you feel like you belong? So where in your world, because belonging is an adult, my dance community, perfect, thank you. Belonging is a requirement for kind of human success. Where is it that we feel like we belong? So at church, in our families, amongst like-minded people, so broader, a home with family and friends, working with children. There's a community that you belong to, cultural background commonalities. At home when you're with your husband, your dog, definitely close friends, yoga circles, boyfriend and dog at home, one of the schools. You feel like you have a real sense of belonging in one of the schools that you work with. And an office here at work, that is lucky. That's definitely not all true. Definitely another like spiritual or community organizations, family and close friends. So notice that where you're talking about these places that have people in them and that people are kind of a requirement for belonging. So we're going to take this activity to the Menti and Sangun will post the link to menti.com and then I'm going to put you all over here. And you can also use a QR code. And we're going to answer some more questions about belonging, and then we're going to talk about hope as well at the same time. So I'm going to switch my screen sharing. Don't worry, because everything that you see right here is going to be on the next screen. So you're not going to lose any of the ability to join the next kind of activity. But we're just going to switch over to the Mentimeter. And Sangun, I'm looking at you. Can you see this? Just with a thumbs up. Excellent. I'm going to refresh it just in case we need to refresh it because I've had it open for a little while. But I see 4 of you are in here. And let's see, if we look at the number, we have 94 participants. So out of 94, let's hope we get at least 50 or 60 in here. So we got 7 so far. You can see at the bottom that the thumbs up tells us how many folks are joining. So we got 12. 13. And again, if you need to get here and you're not using the QR code, you can go to www.menti.com. And then once you get there, you just enter this code 25378453. And that should also get you in if you have any issues, if you're not using your phone with the QR code. We're at 26, so now we're rolling, rock and rolling. And Songun has also put a direct link as well into the chat that hopefully works. And if you have questions, if you're having some tech issues, just let us know. So we got 29 folks joining us, 30. So again, we'll just give it about 30 more seconds for people to be able to join in with around 100 of us on this, or yeah, around 93 of us on this call. We're hoping for maybe half of us at least to be able to join in. So 45, I know lots of things going on for folks in the background. And what we're going to do, and again, if you need that QR code, we can have it here. If you go to the slides that a lot of you have gotten from the slide deck, you can see it there. Or you can use the direct links that are in the chat. And we'll put the link to the slides into the chat one more time, just in case people need those as you're navigating this. The link to the Mentimeter is in the slide deck as well. So we got about 37, 38. We're doing pretty well. So we're going to go, for those of us that are in here, we're going to go just for the time of making sure we have time here together. The power of belonging. So we're going to just split them up into 2 questions. As you see around the power of belonging, the question is like, what does it feel like to belong? So already in the chat, you talked about where you belong. We have people who understand me, the home and the office, my family. And if you feel like you belong in your home and your office, that seems like a gift. safe, comfortable, loved, accepted. You feel welcomed. You see, you all have used word clouds before. This is great. So it should give you the opportunity to submit at least 3 words, and you should be able to submit more than once if you need to. If you see somebody has put in a word that you resonates with you, like loved or comfortable or included, you can put it in and it makes the word obviously larger. And I think many of us have used word clouds, but sometimes not everybody has. So just so you know how word clouds work behind the scenes, the more you type that word, the bigger it's going to get. So safe seems to be a word that's resonating with a lot of people. Um, so if you are contributing in the word cloud, you'll see we've got warm and fuzzy. I like that. You feel welcomed. Sometimes people have similar beliefs. You're included. Um, Seen, I like that word. Safe is huge. Obviously, we're repeating that over and over. Accepted, secure, valued. Look at these words real quick, and we're going to circle around to this. A lot of the slide deck that we have is for you to use. So the reason I'm sharing the slide deck with you is so that you can use it in your own work. If you're someone who's in a community setting and you want to show people around the need for belonging or for hope, that you can use what's in the slide deck. That if you're someone that's working in a school and you want to work with your staff around this, you have some slides in the slide deck that you can use as well. So there are more slides in this slide deck than we're going to get to today. That's on purpose so that I'm equipping you with those. You can use them. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But really, if you look at these words, are our kids feeling this way in school? Because belonging is a school superpower. And if they're going to be successful in school, just like we need these things in our lives, these are human necessities, then we need to make sure that they're feeling safe and loved and seen and accepted and valued and included and confident and comfortable and relaxed and happy and respected in the school setting. And if they're not, it's going to be much harder to be successful in that setting. So you kind of talked about some of the feelings you had in those places. What characteristics, how come those places create those feelings? So you're now talking about the building blocks. So if when you think about answering this question, it's not necessarily repeating the feelings, but what do those places do to make you feel welcomed? What do they do to make you feel secure? They're non-judgmental. They're welcoming. There's low stakes in them. So what are the infrastructure, the building blocks of these places that make you feel this way? They're friendly, they're consistent, they're secure, protected. So the building blocks of these places, if I was going to create a family environment in which you felt like you belong, I would create one that was accessible, low stakes, that was built on relationships, shared values, that was consistent. I would work on these things in my family. I would work on these things in my community setting, in my yoga class, in my dance club, in my school, in all these places. These are the building blocks. If I'm going to be the one creating belonging for someone else, I need to do it through these kind of infrastructure pieces. I'm going to create a non-judgmental place where it's respectful, it's welcoming, it's consistent, there's diversity, people can see themselves represented. There's, for me, centering culture and centering cultural strengths is really important. I see someone put cultural diversity in there. So that to me is centering for feeling like belonging is important there. Um, that there's people are empowered. There's representation. I see representation and accessibility. All these things are really important. If we're really going to have belonging for everybody, it's going to need to have um, representation and accessibility and access for everybody. We can share out these. I'll send them to Sangun, and Sangun, maybe we can find a way to put them up on the website later with the slide deck, so that you can have them for your work. Sometimes what I like to do when I create a word cloud is use these later to illustrate what we're trying to build in a school with family partnerships. This is what we're trying to build. If we're going to say our school enhances belonging, and these are the things that we have to do. So we're going to move into hope. So we haven't talked about hope yet, but hope and belonging are like partners. They go hand in hand. When hope is increasing, belonging increasing. So hope and belonging kind of walk hand in hand. They're like friends. So if you kids feel hopeful in school, their feelings of belonging are going to increase. If they feel like they belong to school, they're going to be hopeful, and vice versa. If they don't feel like they belong or they feel hopeless, those things are gonna be relational. So if I feel hopeless, I'm not going to feel like I belong there. And if I feel like I don't belong here, my feelings of hope are likely going to be low. So we're going to explore that real quick. So the power of hope, and if we were on the slide deck, we'd go to the next slide as well, which is slide 7. But we're going to shift and talk about these again, like two pairs, two peas in a pod, two pairs that go together. When you think about hope, what does it mean to have hope? When you think of somebody that has hope, you look at someone, you're like, that person is so hopeful. Like they are full of hope. They seem like they are just bursting with hope. They dream. They're optimistic. This is going to be a waterfall of answers that we're going to be able to keep. The glass is always half full. They know that something better is coming. That's someone, whoever wrote that one in there knows a little bit about hope. That is part of the hope research, is that you can look in the future and you know that it's going to be something positive is coming down the line. Tomorrow is going to be better. That is straight out of the hope research as well. Like straight that I can achieve what I'm looking for, that's agency. So that is also straight out of hope as well. People that feel like they have purpose, very hopeful. They're open-minded, they're enthusiastic. I see we've got 27 folks in here. They're not afraid to try. That's so true of people that are hopeful. They are not afraid of failure. They're resilient, they bounce back, they're navigating things. Even when there's challenges, hopeful people navigate them and go forward. They have dreams and ambition. They believe better days are ahead, better tomorrow. Absolutely. These are core characteristics of hopeful people, is that tomorrow can be better. They keep going. They're optimistic each new day. Yep. They have a plan for the future. This is a great answer. Hopeful people tend to be goal oriented or have goals that integrate into their hope. They focus on what they'll expand. They have a purpose for sure. They believe. They look for future minded. This is you all are either you're hopeful yourselves or you have a real sense of what hope is. All these answers are fantastic. So what's the opposite? What does it look like when a person lack hopes? When they lack hope, they do not have hope. What does that look like? How do you when you walk into a classroom, you have a flat affect. You are very good at this, y'all. You walk into a classroom and you see someone and you're like, that person's hopeless. Their flat affect, despair is straight out of the research, by the way. So despair comes out of hopelessness. Depressed, they're sad, everything is negative. Anger, that is also, I like multiple people said anger, that is outcome of hopelessness, is anger, not looking towards the future. They may not even know what the future could hold. They aren't understanding pathways. They definitely have a sense of despair, negative over time. Um, feel like they're sucking other people into their despair, a black hole, lack of growth mindset, no motivation, poor body posture for sure, sadness, frustration. You all are rock stars with this. This is hopelessness. What you have described is hopelessness. The exciting thing about hope is you can build it and you can build it quickly. So everybody in this room has the power to build hope, for ourselves and for our family members and for students in schools, and through collaboration. So when you kind of answered this, so let's pop back out and you can answer this if you want, but we're going to pop back to the slide deck because the third one kind of repeated the first one. So we're going to go back to our slide deck and we're going to equip you with some slides that gonna to help you articulate why this is important. So it's 10:48. We're gonna get out of here at 11:30. So this is gonna go pretty quickly. So the next few slides are establishing that there is a real need for hope and belonging, that students are struggling. Again, I invite you to take the content of some of these slides and use them. They're linked, for your own use. So if you're someone that works in a community setting or a family setting, community setting or school setting, excuse me, somewhere where you feel like it might be helpful to be able to lay the foundation, like we really need to focus on increasing hope and belonging, and here's why. I invite you to be resourced by these slides. So I'm going to go through a lot of slides rather quickly because they're built for you to take, not for me to talk through, if that makes sense. And I'm just going to tell you the overall point. The overall point is since the pandemic has only exacerbated the existing inequity. Like we have just seen that racism towards Asian Americans, that barriers for neurodiverse students, students on IEPs, students with exceptionality, students of color, students of low income, those have only grown and increased. So when you see this from the Department of Education, This is a synopsis of what happened during the pandemic, and you can see through 11 observations that basically the barriers and the gaps that already existed were made worse. There's data around this, so these aren't like opinions. We have a lot of data from the Center on Disease Control and from other surveys, from data from emergency room visits, as you can see from emergency room visits from early 2021, and actually even since this research from 2021, we know that emergency room visits for adolescent females, for example, has gone up significantly. Even the research that I can talk about research not on the screen, you can read yourself, but between 2007 and 17, for example, suicide rates for middle schoolers went up 300%. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death for adolescents. Mental health issues for our adolescents and for our children now are a pandemic. They're huge. They're impacting the way that people are being successful in life. And during the pandemic, by the way, adult anxiety went up 266%. So adults are anxious in schools and in home, and kids are anxious in school and home. And when you ask kids, what's the number one barrier to success? And I appreciate the Youth True survey, because if you look at before the survey, the pre-COVID, there's 500,000 students took the survey. And then during the pandemic, 300,000 took the survey. So that's what this is showing, that before we had kind of like a pre-pandemic 500,000 students, during the pandemic, 300,000 students. And what they said was the number one barrier to their success in school was social, emotional, and mental health issues. And that academic development was basically impacted by those things. So a half of the students that participated, or increased by half, said that the number one barrier to doing their best in school was feeling depressed, stressed, or anxious. So our students are telling us explicitly that their mental health is the number one barrier to their work, in schools. So again, this is all accessible by you and used in your own work. And even these slides here around adverse child experiences, these are for you to use as well. If you go to the ACES connection, these are free access and free use. So I try to use things that you can take and use as well without needing to worry about credit, because it gives credit right there already. So if we think about the mental health issues, we also need to include ecological issues with barriers. So we're knowing that we have flooding, things are happening with tornadoes, things are happening with fires in California right now. We have a drought here in central Ohio. We have all sorts of things that are happening that are creating challenges for our students, ecologically. The original Adverse Child Experiences study back in 1998, which was originally and the most famous, it wasn't actually the first one. There was a couple before that, Adverse Child, and those of you that are familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, a famous study in 1998. And if you're not familiar and this is new for you, then throw it in the chat and I'll talk about it more. So if you're like, this is new, just write, this is new, and I'll spend a little more time talking about it than I would otherwise. So adverse child experiences are basically potential traumas that people can experience, and childhood is the key part here. And so as we're in our childhood development, we experience these things and they load into, and that's an important word, they're not correlated, they actually cause future and current health issues. So this talks about the realms of ACEs, and the next slide is going to talk about the consequences of ACEs, but they're usually consequences are talked about in future tense, like this is what's going to happen in the future. Well, we also know that kids that are struggling from adverse child experiences, they have immediate consequences. So they're more likely to visit the emergency room, for example, more likely to miss school because of health issues. They're more likely to have behavior issues in schools. They're more likely to have dysregulation in schools. They're more likely to have trauma responses. So these things are impacting our students right now. The original study took place with things in the household. So it talked about these things in the tree. It was really talking about abuse and neglect and mental health issues in the house. Well, in the 25 years since then, that study, we've had a lot of additional research that showed that the community factors are impacting, the experiences of our and mental health of our students as well. There's another area of community factors that you can Google, if you're interested in this kind of No, but we can get it. That's a great question, Victor, and we can make it accessible and get it translated in Spanish for sure if you want. And there's ways to do that, by the way, through multiple technologies. Sidebar. But on the community adverse child experiences, you can Google search social determinants of health, and they'll give you a really strong structure for how to understand the community impact on trauma, potential traumas. By the way, the Philadelphia ACEs study, if you can Google that as well, if you're interested, was a study that illustrated that racism is an adverse child experience. It leads to low birth rates, leads to other traumas. I mean, I think that was pretty commonly known, but having the science literally say racism is an adverse child experience, racism loads into negative health outcomes, is significant just to advocate for equity and access. So as you think about the last 25 years, average child experiences have expanded. Oops. And I just clicked on it, opened it up in another link, which is great, but that's not what I wanted to do. So what the outcomes of adverse child experience are, again, this is loading into, these are not correlational, but a lot of outcomes not covered on this slide as well. So you can see it leads to people who have 4 or more average child experiences have 14 times more likely to have the number of suicide attempts than the general population that have 4 or fewer ACEs. ACEs actually lead to COPD, intravenous drug use, 50 more sexual partners, unintended pregnancies, liver disease, mental health issues, anxiety, depression, things like that. And a lot of the population has at least one average child experience, and we're obviously realizing more and more of us have 4 or more. And that has an impact on, towards the end, early death. So folks that have 4 or more adverse child experiences are more likely to die in their 50s than those who do not. So this is called the #1 health crisis in the United States by the Center for Disease Control. Again, these are all slides that are accessible for you to use in your own work as you help educate others. CA Narratives is another resource that has free access or resources for you, and it just kind of illustrates how this works. What we know, the most recent research is showing that potential traumas from ACEs, and I say potential because one of the ACEs, for example, is divorce. And you might have two children in the same household, depending on their ages, depending on their experiences. One person would experience that in one way, another person would experience it entirely different. It may not be a trauma for one of the children, it is a trauma for the other one. So we tend to talk about ACEs as potential traumas because people can experience them very differently. But as people experience them in a traumatic way, it changed the physiology of that person down to the DNA level. We had known for a long time it changed neural pathways, it changes the way the brain works. And when we as adults ask kids to do things differently, behave differently without training them different skills, it's kind of unfair. And so really working with kids with new skill development, working with adults to change the way they work with kids is really, really important. So even as we work with our own families and our communities to build belonging, to build safety, to build those things, if you think about the things that you wrote that are a requirement of belonging, those are going to look different for somebody that has 4 or more adverse child experiences. Kids in foster care, around like 90+% and 98% of the population have like 8 or more adverse child experiences. The things that we can do to impact the potential traumas from adverse child experiences are build protective factors. The other thing we can do, by the way, is impact the system. So those of us that are adults that are in our communities, the way that we work with our communities to create things like housing and accessibility to healthcare and other equity issues, that advocacy and political advocacy, those things matter. And you can impact and make positive social determinants of health instead of negative ones. So what I'm talking about now is buffering traumas, but I would also love for us to focus on preventing these traumas. And so it's a 2-pronged approach, changing the ecology, preventing the traumas from even occurring in the first place. And then when we're working with folks who have been traumatized or are working in environments that are traumatizing, how do we help buffer those impacts? We help buffer that with hope and belonging. So that's the good news, is that we can do that work with hope and belonging. So there's kind of 2 ways to organize these things, and they're called protective factors or positive child experiences. The only difference, I'm going to go really quickly, is that protective factors have been around longer and they go general towards trauma. Positive child experiences have been researched relatively more recently, and they load or buffer directly into adverse child experiences. That research is still kind of expanding. The positive child experiences research is still expanding. Protective factors have been around for quite a while. So positive child experiences, if you notice some of these are going to be about the things that relate to belonging. How do we prevent these factors? So if we go back, we'll go back real quick. If we're going back and we look at this slide and we want to prevent traumas, we want to prevent the factors that are impacting our students, then we really need to think about the organizations and systems and communities in which we live. For example, I'm just going to talk about history now real quickly. For example, when I was working in Durham, North Carolina, I've learned that the history in Durham, North Carolina was that the interstate was built directly through the African American business district, and it destroyed it intentionally. This wasn't by accident. This was like, where are we going to put this thing? Well, let's go through this thriving Black district. And so we created inequity, we created poverty. The community created this poverty by allowing this interstate to go through and destroy and create that kind of lack of access and resources. So when I talk about preventing trauma and looking at social determinants of health, there are things that we can do around being really transparent and honest about the distribution of resources, where are hospitals, where are our social capital mobility, how do we look at school? So one of the things you can look at is school funding, for example. School funding is not by accident. There was a Supreme Court decision in 1973, Rodriguez versus San Antonio. I can put that into the chat. The Supreme Court decision in 1973, I think it was 73 or 74, established that when Rodriguez sued San Antonio Unified School District for inequitable education, saying, look, if you go across the school district, there are schools that are highly funded, and then there are schools that have no funding. That's not equitable. How am I going to get the same education as other people when we know that poverty and lack of resources predicts low test scores, for example, or predicts the lack of achievement? So we know that correlation, but we're not funding schools equally. I should get an equal education. The Supreme Court came back and said, nope, they found for San Antonio. And they said, you do not deserve an equal education. You just deserve an education. And it reinforced inequity in funding, which is how our funding for schools continues today. Basically, if you live in a neighborhood that has a tax foundation and a base that provides funding for schools, you're going to have a lot of resources. You're going to have everything you need to be successful and navigate a pandemic. If you don't, then you're not. And so being kind of educated and aware around that these types of disparities are not by accident, that they actually have been reinforced by the system, and then changing those with politicians, with advocacy, with ensuring that there's neighborhood food gardens, that like there's fresh food and vegetables for folks in their communities. We can get the link to Rodriguez from San Antonio, you bet. It's a quick Google and we can add it in later. But these, I can obviously talk about these things, these system things all day. These are a passion area of mine. But when you look at this particular slide, if we want to prevent the traumas, then we need to look at the way that the community was created, how communities are created, and how do we ensure that people have access to pathways and access to opportunities in an equitable way. So we can have a whole nother presentation just on that. That would be really, really important and work that we can do. Once we realize that folks are navigating this, we need to start building protective factors. I've highlighted in blue all the protective factors that relate to belonging and hope, and you can see it's most of them. So if you look at these, and you can think about this in your own families or your communities or your yoga class or the places that you listed that you felt like you belong, you use some of these words, like people feel like they have positive relationships with you. Pro-social means you have friends that care about you because of who you are, not because of what they're getting out of the friendship. Empathy, emotional stability, positive relationships. So these are the things that are required to buffer trauma and help people bounce back from trauma. And these are the same things that are in belonging and hope. So again, take some time after the presentation, kind of looking through these things. The next few slides are for you to use as well. It's just the research that kind of illustrates the impact of protective factors. They lead to better health, school success, lowers depression, lowers anxiety. So when we talked about anxiety being something that people are experiencing tremendously, the more you can implement belonging, the more you can impact hope, the more you can increase those two things, the lower anxiety, depression, distress are going to be. We found that unfortunately, many high school people who identify as females, so high school females experience dating abuse. When they will bounce back from that or navigate it better if they have strong social supports and empathy from others, and those are also related to belonging. So these things are really helpful around creating social bonds, helping to decrease rearrests after folks have had interactions with the legal system. Again, increasing positive mental health, reducing anxieties, increasing psychological resilience, all those things. So it's 11:05. I know we got 25 minutes together. So let's focus the majority of the rest of our time on how do you build hope? What is hope and belonging? How do you build hope and belonging? And how do you do that with a family and school partnership? How do you do that intentionally? And again, if you have questions, my email will be at the end and Song-Eun can put it in there in the chat. We can follow up and we can do, you know, we've done all sorts of presentations and workshops and of different kinds around different aspects of this work. So hope is basically the things that you wrote into the Mentimeter, which is why I was just so excited when you were contributing. It's the belief that your future can be brighter and better than your past, and you have a role to play in making it better. And Casey Gwynn and Chan Hellman, Dr. Chan Hellman, wrote a book called Hope Rising. I encourage you to look into that book. If you're someone that's excited about hope like I am, then you really want to look into that book. It's an excellent book around everything hope. And we'll just put it into the chat. So there's two pieces of hope, agency and what people call willpower. So those are interchangeable terms, and pathways, which is way power. The interesting thing about agency and pathways is agency and pathways together build hope. It's also goal oriented. Many of you have like a plan, see a future. All those things are a requirement. So if we go back and we look at the question around what Crystal posted in the chat, like how do we prevent these factors? How do we, when you look at the ecology in which people are living, do we see pathways? And so when you talk about, for me, a really important part of schooling is centering like cultural pride, centering family pride, centering families in education, centering cultural assets and strengths and traditions in education is really important. And why is that really important? Because it creates pathways. There's this work that you can see towards the future. And you can see with social determinants of health and community ACEs, pathways are blocked. There are no pathways. And so the agency decreases, despair increases, anger increases because pathways are blocked and there's no motivation or access to agency to move forward. And so resourcing and harnessing the strengths of our cultures, the strengths of our backgrounds, the strengths of our families is incredibly important towards creating hope. And so as you work with schools and you work with your communities and you work with those places, I encourage you to center those things in the work around building pathways and hope. So out of impact of hope, out of a study that looked at 24 different characteristics of well-being, hope really came out as the number one thing. Impact of higher hope are all the things that schools value. So one of the really important communications that I try to do when I'm working with buildings and I get to work all across the country with schools, it makes me really happy. But I'm talking to superintendents or administrators, and when you talk to them, I would encourage you to say, if you're focusing entirely on test scores and achievement rates, it doesn't mean that kids' hope or their belonging is increasing, or their anxiety is going down, or their depression is going down, or any of those things are going down. Those have no correlation. But if you focus on hope, then test scores go up, achievement goes up. So if you're focusing on the right things, and the right things for me mean holistic health of human beings, so belonging and hope in our own lives, when those things go up, then the things that administrators want and politicians want around test scores, which by the way, non-cognitive skills, so things that are not those things that are like executive functioning, hope, belonging, they're a better predictor of future earning level than test scores. So if you're trying to say, well, test scores mean that we're going to be better contributors to society, That's not what the economist research says. The economist research actually says these constructs, these things are better predictors of future contributions to society and earning level than test scores. What test scores really predict, by the way, the most latest research shows that test scores really predict the education level of the mother, socioeconomics of the family, and opportunities that were created by those first two things. And someone can write this in the chat too, but it's just three things. Test scores really predict three things: education level of the mother, socioeconomic status of the family, and opportunities that are created by those other two things. So when we think about what is it that we want to invest in our kids to predict a positive future, it's not test scores. It's these types of hope and belonging and those types of foundational pieces. The other impacts of hope, we have lower absences, higher post-secondary rates, a full GPA higher for folks that are around the same ability but have lower levels of hope. So hope impacts academic achievement, graduation rates, post-secondary rates. People are way more likely to be invested in school, feel like they can do well in school. And hope and belonging, like I said, they go hand in hand. Hope predicts school belonging, and if you have school belonging, you're going to probably have high levels of hope. You talked earlier around what happens when people don't have hope. You put that into the Mentimeter. It's like foreshadowing. Exactly right. When people don't have hope, the first thing that happens afterwards, if they have goals, but the goals are blocked, their agency, they want to move forward, but they have no pathways for moving forward. They can't see the way they go forward, then people get angry. And then once their anger is like spent, then you become despair. And you would even use this word despair in your responses. And then when you walk into a classroom and you see kids with their head down, sometimes our kids aren't sleeping at night because they're on social media or other things, that's a different thing. But if their heads are down and they're not asleep, they're just apathetic. And we hear this a lot from educators. Like, I don't understand, in middle school, kids are just not motivated. I'm like, you don't really understand why they're not motivated in middle school. Like, let's talk about why would they want to come to school? Is it fun? Is it engaging? Do they feel like they belong? Is it dynamic? Can they see a future? Do they connect that with the values of their family and what's going on at home? Do they connect those pieces? If not, apathy is going to happen and kids are going to be disengaged. It's a natural consequence to an education system that wasn't necessarily built for everyone, that was built for people that look like me. And I'm kind of like the ideal outcome of the education system, someone who's teaching in the education system. But wasn't built for everybody. So for those people how do we change the education to make sure it is built for everybody? And if we don't change it, you'll see apathy, an apathetic outcome. You may hear my dog bark in the background. She's doing her job. Somebody's coming up to the door, maybe. So the simplicity of hope. We have goals. So I'm going to shut this door real quick. Thank you. Um, Wonderful pets doing their work. All right, so we have goals, which often help direct pathways and willpower. So it's not complicated. It's pretty simple. And again, giving Dr. Chelman, Victor, you're talking about multiple impacts on pathways there, and also the way that schools are not necessarily built for multilingual students, and we can talk more about that too. We have a whole Songhoon, I don't know if you can share the resources that were just built on the website for multilingual students, but that's a really real, tangible example of what we're talking about when we don't have pathways and agency is kind of blocked. So I appreciate that example in the chat. And then just so that I know we're recording and the recording people can't see what's in the chat, Victor wrote, I work with ELL students. Not having legal status in this country really affects their hope to be able to go to college. Also, it affects their pathways. So the pathways being part of hope and then agency being able to see a pathway. I will also say that a real value oftentimes in general of multilingual students and families is a cultural aspirational value. And so wanting to do that, wanting to go and have pathways is such a strength of those families and the community that we need to harness that in our schools and really work towards supporting that. So you can build hope, be hope-centered, positive affirming, ask open-ended questions, listen, empathize, try to start creating pathways for folks, make sure that people are a lot of agency willpower boosts, or by the way, agency boosts are somebody saying, you can do this. One of the phrases in the original research is you can get there from here. Like you encourage someone to see the pathway and navigate the pathway. Take care of yourself. Here's the building blocks. Here's where you want to go. Here's how to help do this. And so helping people understand their why, understand the way they can get there, understand their own assets and strengths, and connecting that to their future are hope builders. So you can do this in your own family. I imagine even just through conversations with those in your family, when you're talking about, the things that people are passionate about, what they love, what do they want to do, how can they get there? Those conversations are hope builders. So hope building is not something that takes months and months and years and years. It can literally take place very quickly as you structure your conversations around that. There's a link to the children's hope scale and the adult scale. I often do adult hope scale with staff, teachers, school counselors, and you'll not be surprised probably that on the adult hope scale, many of us, most of us, don't score at the highest level of hope. So working on our own hope so we can be contagious in our enthusiasm and our future orientation and our creating of pathways can help with working with children and those in our family. So um, go ahead and explore the adult hope scale on your own time and use it as you wish. The Children's Hope Scale has 6 items. It's very short. You can put it on a Google form. And 3 of those items are around agency. I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing just as well as other kids. I think I've done the well past, help me in the future. And 3 of those items are around pathways. So this scale is for yours to use as well. Here's how you score it as well. Hope can definitely increase. You can increase it rather quickly. Last spring, our practicum students here in the master's program, many of their practicum experiences was using the HOPE scale as a baseline, doing small group interventions around goal setting and assets like who are you, what assets do you have, what are the cultural and strengths do you have of your family, and then doing a post with the HOPE instrument, and HOPE rose. And as HOPE rose, officer referrals went down. And that also happened in Shasta County with Song Loon's work in the schools there. As HOPE went up, officer referrals went down, achievement went up. So hope impacts those things, and you can definitely use it in your own work and use it with your families. So I'm going to skip some of these and you can use them in your own work, but I want to get to belonging and then get your feedback before we get out of here in about 14 minutes. So again, hope and belonging, they're pairs, they're buddies, they walk hand in hand as they go through. You've already talked to me about what belonging is and you nailed it. I mean, it's all about being in a safe place where you feel like you're appreciated. I love the word seen. I mean, I don't know about you all, but vulnerability is not easy for human beings. When someone actually sees you and for who you are and accepts you for that, that's a rare and powerful thing. And if we can do that in schools and in our communities and our families, you're going to build belonging. So words, you'll hear this, by the way, the CDC calls this school connectedness. You'll hear it interchangeably between connectedness or community or school engagement, school bonding. Really, we're talking about school belonging all interchangeably with those other terms. So just so that you don't get confused when you hear like school connectedness in your mind, you'd be like, all right, so we're talking about belonging. We've already defined this, the same definition as we talked about at the very beginning, being accepted, respected, included, and supported by others. So that means by adults and by peers in the school. So it's important, foundational pieces of belonging are feeling like you're a part of the school, you're happy to be at school, teachers care about you, that you feel like you're treated fairly, which we know, by the way, disproportionality of officer referrals for students of color, suspensions, that people are not treated fairly. There's the data just shows that they're not. So addressing that with schools, positive relationships with other students and feel safe at school. That's not always true right now. So bringing that in. So you as family members, as caretakers, your advocacy around building schools that have these components can go very far away. It goes a long way to have family members come in and advocate. What are you doing to increase belonging? How are you creating safety? What are your peer-to-peer relationship programs? What are your peer-to-teacher relationship programs? How do you intentionally build belonging in this school? And if there's no answers, then that's something that you can challenge. Higher belonging has the same similar things to hope. As belonging goes up, academic achievement is going to go up. Test scores are going to go higher. Mental health issues are going to go lower. Self-efficacy, self-esteem, those things that we need for agency to improve our agency with hope, those are all going to go up. Life satisfaction is going to go up. And I don't know about you, but when I was a kid and I was thinking about my future, I wasn't necessarily thinking about, I just wanted to have something where I could have fun and be happy and enjoy life. As a kid, it's really kind of, I would avoid asking an elementary kid, what do you want to be in the future? Like, they don't know. Instead, ask them, what do you love? What do you love doing outside of school? What do they doing inside of school? Help them connect the things that they love to possible futures. That's going to help them find life satisfaction. The Center for Disease Control identifies school connectedness, which again, school belonging, as a primary focus of their entire center. So nationally, the Center for Disease Control is saying we need to be focusing our schools on building connection. That's what we need to be doing. So we can do that by leveraging school and family partnerships, by the way. So when we think about, we built and published 5 high impact strategies for school family partnerships. Each of these has potential to build hope and belonging. So the 5 are, and we can throw these in the chat as well, but you have these resources. How do you help your child know they belong in the school community? So if you're talking, yeah, exactly. Perfect. So there are things you're already doing. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like you're already doing things that help create community. You want to make sure you're challenging your school that they're doing things intentionally to create positive school community. How do you support your child's relationship with their teachers? How do you really focus on building family and school routines and traditions? So celebrating those family traditions, those cultural traditions, and having the school celebrate them as well is really powerful for people to be seen. um, oh, that's nice, Julie. I like that. So Julie just said there was a master class. Instead of asking kids what they want to be when they grow up, consider asking them, what problems do you see in the world that you'd like to help solve? That's that's I would love to see like a high school just like project on that. And then seeing what they did with uh, that project with high school. So 4, supporting behaviors that build success and well-being. And 5, continue to build good relationships at home. So the next few slides, we can put the link, or actually the link is going to be in the slide deck to this research. And we've done this on the website for the Ohio State Family Engagement Center. So you can think about willpower and weight power ideas when you want to create a sense of belonging, when you talk about what's going on at school, when you talk about celebrating what they're learning, getting them to participate in activities, talking to them about who they are and what they want to explore, you're going to create both willpower and weight power. So each of these slides has examples around what you can do at home to help build on one of the 5 strategies. And Song Moon just dropped that into the chat. So I'm going to just kind of go through this real quickly. Do celebrate school traditions with your child, but also ask the school to celebrate your cultural traditions. That's really important. And your school needs to be adjusting to centering family cultures and celebrations and cultural traditions in the school day, and that will help with belonging. There are things like healthy eating habits, the school success, executive functioning, being able to set goals, being able to get yourself up in the morning, get yourself around, having regular bedtimes, getting people's interests and passion areas. All these things will help with somebody's success in school. So thinking about, as you come back to these slides later, you're thinking about what do you want to do in your organization or your school or in your family to help build these things. And what we can do, and I would love to see what somebody types in the response to Kylie around clarifying that question. If nobody responds, I'll respond in like 2 minutes, Kylie. And then how do you build these relationships at home? How do you intentionally build belonging at home? So thinking about the way that you celebrate the things that the kids in your life love. What do you do to have fun? Centering fun. So like cooking together is a great example of that. Oftentimes we'll have people write in the chat, like, what do you do at home that creates that sense of belonging? And some people say, we talk in the car as we drive. We take walks together. We have game nights together. We go to religious events together. We go to church together. We go to spiritual things together. We pray together. We have cultural traditions together. We celebrate all sorts of things together, and that builds relationship. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Always, I remember my grandmother definitely was away. So that's our final activity. We're going to go back to the Mentimeter, and you're going to respond, what are ways that you think we can build hope in our families? How might we build belonging in our partnership work? And then really importantly, if we have time, which we might run out of time, but really importantly, thinking about these should change by cultural communities. We should be centering and asking the communities themselves to teach us, to not teach us in the sense of teach me what I need to know about you, but help inform and direct our cultural celebrations and traditions. So student voice and family voice is more like what I'm talking about. So let's jump back over to the Mentimeter to close out our time together. And I'll give everybody time to jump back in. I see there's 7 of us. And as you're jumping back in, I'm going to answer Kylie's question. So again, Kylie, you asked, can we reiterate why you don't ask students what they want to be when they grow up? And then Crystal responded, ideally, which is it's a developmental thing. If you try to think back to when you're an elementary kid or a middle school student, it's really impossible. And to reiterate this on a different level, I think the average college student changes majors like 6 times. So like we don't even know, our brains aren't even fully formed until we're 26. So we don't really know what we are going to do and really who we are till much later in life. And so when you're working with elementary kids and middle school kids, it can be more effective to ask them what they love doing, what are they excited about doing outside of school and inside of school, and then connecting that to possible futures, like possible pathways. And then we had Julie posted in the chat. You can also ask them, like, consider what problems in the world you like to solve, and that would probably developmentally be more towards middle school and then high schoolers. That question would work really well. But until you get up into, adolescence, it is often more help just to explore what people are excited and what they love. So we've got about 93 of us. You stuck with me the whole time. Amazing. Thank you. So we got about 24 of 93 of us in this to close out and complete the Mentimeter, which is all good. Let's just crowdsource how we might use the science of hope in our own families. And remember, the science of hope is just 2 things. Don't make it so too complicated. Just agency and pathways. Uh, and so Crystal's post in the chat is wonderful. And just because we have a recording, Crystal wrote, I've always thought there should be a high school class just to give kids ideas of career paths. There are so many job options they don't even know about. And that's the way the world is. They're saying like how we prepare our kids now for the world is, you can't really prepare them for the job that doesn't exist or one that's changing all the time with AI and tech. So you bet, Alice, the source on the idea that hope's a better indicator of success than test scores. There's economist research on that we can send you that talks about non-cognitives being a better predictor of earning level in the future. But Gallup actually did research that illustrated that hope is a better predictor of post-secondary success than ACT, SAT, or GPA. And that's out of the Gallup. Yep. So being present, planning opportunities, instilling positive environments, making family a priority, empowering, listening. Yes, definitely. Exploring our world and community, discuss what they enjoy doing, including all voices, know what's out there, open their eyes to a bigger world. What that person has done, give our kids opportunities to know what's out there and open their eyes to the bigger world. That's pathway building. So you're absolutely building hope when you do that because you're showing all these different paths. By the way, the research also shows it's important to let folks know when there are barriers. So it's very important. We're talking about disproportionality of office referrals, students of color being disciplined more often, not having access to AP or IB courses in the same way, or even STEM courses. It's actually important to tell kids like this system may be more difficult for you. How are we going to navigate that, create pathways through it? And so one of the things that you've done there with opportunities is very important. Meaningful connections, goal setting and helping them reach their goal. So important. Setting long-term and short-term, I would say, tangible goals, provide supporting to meet those goals. You've just done agency and pathways. That's outstanding. Making sure family are acknowledged as important, creating genuine and meaningful connections and relationships, helping them create a sense of belonging and how to navigate pathways. I love that you're using the language of hope to navigate and build hope. So important. Exposure to opportunities, super important. Just listening to actually listen, that's not usually done. So that's huge. And navigating things that they'll face as adults. One of the things that I would say that this is really important that I say this accurately, giving them tools to navigate tough things they'll face as adults. Sometimes you'll get into high school and there'll be some adults in the high school that are like, we're going to have to treat them like adults and they need to get ready for the world. And they're going to basically mini traumatize them. So when they get to the other big traumas, they'll be ready with the little trauma. Like, we don't need to do that. Like, let's not do little traumas to prepare kids for their trauma of adulthood. Let's give them the tools and the protective factors and the resources they need to navigate those things when they reach them later. So I love that commentary. Thank you. Oh, I love this. The best way to increase hope in our families is find pathways that are blocked and help break those barriers by finding resources or agencies and break those blockages. All right, we got 1 minute left. We'll I'm going to leave this up and how might we build belonging in our partnership work. I'll leave this up as I close. Just thank you for being here today. I know we went very fast. You have the slide deck. And you can use this slide deck again. We'll post the results of the Mentimeter to the website later with the presentation. But please remember, part of the reason there's so many slides in there is for you to use them. Like, the idea is that you are now the builders of hope, the creators of belonging. You have tools in the slide deck to help advocate for that, the reason, the justification why, resources around doing that. And I wish you all the best in doing that in your families, in your relationships with your schools, as you support your students and your children. And just thanks for being here today. I hope you have a great rest of the day, great rest of the conference. And Sung,